Wait, did we ever establish where we met each other? I mean,
Well,
I guess there, and then, but how did we become friends from that? We just started hanging out more and more.
we just started hanging out, and there was like the Brambleberries.
Oh, we've been
our
in some
bluegrass
bands together. Yeah.
folk band, and then the AM, which was another one that just the two of us with a third party sometimes. And that was kind of like, I think, how we started to kind of just hang out more.
Yeah. We should say, really, at the end here, though, that the AM was really an amazing band.
Incredible band. You had a megaphone on top of a helmet that was battery powered. We're a fully battery powered band. I played drums.
Powered, yeah.
You had an AM, the megaphone on top, and with a guitar, little amplifier like that would just all battery powered.
Oh, out of the megaphone.
The megaphone, yeah.
So vocal and guitar came out of the megaphone.
Out of the megaphone, I could drum, and
our goal was to pretty much play every 7-Eleven in town.
Yes, and we did. We did one,
and like, and
which may have been the only one.
Like pirated, just we would send out an email, and whoever showed up,
Yeah, it was great.
And we did a little bit of touring,
Southern California, Arizona.
Yeah, it was a great band. And then and that was before I went into 3-year retreat, and I felt like I wanted to make as much noise as possible.
Yeah.
Before I got into retreat.
Kind of epitome to have a megaphone blasting out. And then just...
I was like, it's about to get really quiet.
Yeah.
Got to go out with the bang.
So we have this really rich history in music together, and you've told me so many cool stories about your time in India and your musical journey that brought you there. I just want to know if you could share some of those.
So my time in India had really two threads to it. And one thread was that I had this intuition that I would die when I was 28. And I had had it since I was like really little, and I don't know what that was about. And so I had already studied classical Indian music. I'd gone to the Ali Akbar College of Music in San Rafael, California, and then studied pretty intensively for a couple of years. And then I had this intuition that I would die when I was 28. And my teacher, Murray, always told me about this city called Varanasi, which is the oldest continually inhabited city on the face of the planet. And it's just an amazing ancient city, a really vibrant, incredibly active city. And it's also known as the city of death, where you go to die. So all Hindus try to make that pilgrimage, and there's a belief that if you die in Varanasi, you're achieve full awakening in the afterlife and all this stuff. But I thought, well, I want to go study music more, and I feel like I'm probably going to die this year, so I might as well go to India and die there. I didn't tell my poor family this, but I got all of my things in order. I got rid of my stuff, and I wrote a will, and I had a friend hold on to the will, and I kind of said goodbye to everybody, and it was really intense, emotional time, because I really felt like that was it, and I felt like I was saying goodbye to people, but I couldn't tell them I was saying goodbye to them. Anyway, obviously I didn't die.
Really?
The intuition was totally wrong, and I don't know where it came from or why it happened. But I went to India, and so I was there for two reasons: one, to prepare for death, but also to study classical Indian music. And Indian music is just a really beautiful, deep history of classical Indian music. But the way you find a teacher is it's like finding a spiritual teacher. You just go like door to door and try to find a teacher. And I was going door to door, and I was a Westerner, and my teacher in America was one of the greatest Indian musicians of all time. And so I could get interviews with like the greatest teachers in Varanasi, these super famous people, And so I was going door to door, and I was meeting all these guys, and they're all a little bit pompous and incredible. I would be pompous if I was that good too. I mean, it was like, these guys were the bomb. They were so good, and they were so cocky. And I had this feeling, because I had this concept in my mind that I was going to die also. So I was like in this odd circumstance of trying to learn and become more proficient at music, but also realizing like this is also the last days of my life. So I was like, I kept having this feeling like, okay, if I'm going to spend, and there you study every day with somebody. It's not like a lesson once a week. It's like every day. So I was like, if I'm going to spend time with somebody, I want them to be like a beautiful human being, you know? And finally, I couldn't find a teacher. And finally, I met this guy, and he's like, you should go meet my teacher. He's like, not many people are studying with him because he had a stroke, so he can't move half of his body.
Wow.
So he really couldn't play much anymore, you know? He's super poor. And
this is for the tabla teacher.
Yeah, tablas. So I was studying the Indian drum called tablas, which are the North Indian percussion that accompanies sitar and sarod and sarangi. And so I finally met this guy, and he was beautiful. He was a really extraordinary person. But he wanted to charge me more than the top teachers. And I was like, this guy's just scamming me, you know?
Yeah.
But he was like, had this kind of like, just like a good heart, even though I felt like he was scamming me. So I agreed to study with him. And tabla players can see it in me because my left hand technique is much poorer than my right hand technique because his left side of his body was paralyzed. And it's so interesting that like that comes across, you know?
Yeah.
And people be like, oh yeah, you got a poor left hand technique. It's like, but so he's a really beautiful person. I was his first student every morning. So him and his wife and his son and his daughter-in-law and his grandkid all slept in the same bed. It was just a large mattress on the floor.
Wow.
And they all slept in there. And then that bed rolled up and became his music studio.
Wow.
So sometimes I got there and they were just still like in bed or like rolling up the bed, you know, and so I'd help the wife in the kitchen getting the morning chai and, you know,
Yeah.
and they eat like really spicy like chickpeas for breakfast. And so sometimes I'd have breakfast with them, and sometimes I'd massage his paralyzed arm. And, you know, that was like a whole part of it. And it was just this beautiful thing of kind of becoming part of the family. But one day after about 3 months of studying with him, I paid him, I don't know if I paid him weekly or bi-monthly, but I went to pay him. And he like looked at me like, what is this? I was like, this is Swapanji. This is like what I owe you, you know? He's like, no, we don't do that anymore. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, it's not about money anymore. And he refused to take money from me from there on after.
Oh, wow.
And he's like, just to weed out the tourists. You know? He's like, I get as much out of them as I can. And so it was really beautiful. And I had an amazing experience with him. But so, but here's the neat thing about Indian music that you don't see much anymore is that the way Indian music. So what you have in America is you have let's take Bruce Springsteen. You have just a superstar, right? And plays these huge concerts and and it's just like over the top. But in India you have these really wealthy patrons are the ones that are supporting the musicians, and what they do is they have house concerts. And the house concerts are like between 50 and 100 people that come to the concert. Oh. And it's all by invitation only. And it's usually major security. Security is a status symbol in India. So if you have like 5 guys with machine guns at your front door, it's like a status symbol. So it's always like over the top. And I heard that there's also like some mafia stuff in classical music. And so somebody was like, because at first I was like, what's with all the machine guns, you know?
It's like Sinatra or something.
Yeah, exactly. It feels like that. So you would have somebody literally at Bruce Springsteen's level of fame playing in your living room, and you invite like the status symbols in the community to come to the concert. Yeah. And then everybody would chip in a little bit, like they kind of pass that kind of thing. But you're really paying the musicians, like you'd be paying like something like $20,000, you know, for this guy to come sing in your living room. Yeah. And then, so ragas, if you're not familiar with ragas are the songs in Indian classical music. Ragas really changed length when the LP was invented. And then they started to fit into 90 minutes. So when you see the first LP ragas, they're all like 90 minutes. I think that's the length of an LP, something around that, or is it 45? But
I think it's 90.
So, but before that, a raga could last 3.5 hours. So in these house concerts, they do traditional ragas. So a raga will last like a 3.5, 4 hour raga. And in between, there's a couple different types of ragas. Not types, there's a couple different like sections of a raga. So in between sections, you'll take a break, and then they'll pass out Indian sweets and chai for everybody, and everybody stretches their legs and stuff, and then they start it up again. The other thing about ragas is ragas are all designed for specific times a day. So typically in America, you'll only hear evening ragas because they only do concerts in the evening. But in India, you'll have like a super early morning raga, so a concert might start at 3 a.m. So you set your alarm, you like get all dressed up, you go across town, you show your invitation to all the guys with machine guns, they let you in, you take your shoes off, you go up into the living room, and it's still like and then just about sunrise, the music will start. It's just extraordinary. It's really beautiful. So I was obviously wanting to get these invitations, and they're hard to get. And I thought at first, like being a Westerner, I might get an invitation, you know, but I wasn't getting them. And then I met this beautiful Scottish woman that had been living in Varanasi for years, and she would get invitations because she was a really phenomenal musician. She played my all-time favorite instrument called a sarangi, and a sarangi is like 100-string bowed instrument. It supposedly mimics the human voice closer than any other instrument.
Wow.
It has the full range, you know.
Whoa.
It's from really deep, like Tibetan lows to like Mariah Carey highs.
Wow.
You know? But it's a great instrument. So she started getting me invitations. I started going to these concerts. And but one concert I didn't have an invitation to, and it was these two brothers, Rajan and Sajan Mishra. And they're like just these ultimate superstars of classical Indian music.
Yeah.
And so I got to the door, and my friend also didn't have invitations, but we're like, well, let's just get really dressed up, and maybe as Westerners we can fudge our way in, you know.
Yeah.
But they were like not having it, you know. And then all of a sudden there was a little scuffle, and I still don't know what happened, but all the guys with guns suddenly got really like alert and like jumped to the scene, and I just saw like the entrance to the door just had this moment of openness. So I just like casually walked right through the front door. And then I saw none of my friends made it, you know. I felt like so bad, but it's like, and it was mind-blowing concert. Yeah, so it was an early afternoon concert, probably like, I don't know, like 10 o'clock, you know, so probably like 10 to 2 o'clock.
Yeah.
And typically who you invite to the concert is also very accomplished musicians.
Yeah.
So in the front 4 rows will be all of this real heavy hitters, like the real superstars in the audience, and some of them will be famous musicians, you know. Yeah. So, and then the rest are, you know, in the back are peons, you know, like me. But classical Indian music, I compare it sometimes to like football, in that there's a movement through the tala, which is the rhythm cycle. And what you're doing is you're creating this tension through the tala, through the rhythm cycle. And the musicians are creating tension in terms of the melody. And then you're trying to get that to resolve on the downbeat of what's called the sum, or the downbeat, right? And so let's say we have a cycle of 12 beats. So every one would be a kind of like downbeat, a resolution. But you could also do that 48, like a 48 beat, and it would then resolve back on the one.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you might resolve every 12 beats, you might resolve every 24 beats, you might have the resolution every 48 beats.
Okay.
So that means you have 48 beats to create an incredible tension.
Yeah.
And it might even be a lot longer than that. Like it might be a full minute of creating tension, or 2 minutes, and then you have a resolution of that tension. Now, if you think about football, it's the same thing. It's this tension building up, and then the touchdown is the resolution, and everybody freaks out at the touchdown.
Yeah.
So a really good classical Indian music concert has that same energy, and you count it on the spaces between your knuckles and your hands. So if you look at your fingers, you have 3 lines. You have the line where your finger meets your hand, and then at each fold you have another line.
Yeah.
And then at the top is a 4th. So typically a lot of classical Indian music is 16 beats. So you count it, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 1. So everybody in the audience is counting, and then there's different ways of counting the 7-beat cycle. You can even count a 7.5-beat cycle. Everybody in the audience, because they're all educated, they're all counting in the exact same way. And everybody's looking for the resolution of the 1. And then when it comes, and if it's particularly skillful, the whole place freaks out.
Yeah.
But the musicians are really just playing for 2 or 3 people in the front row. And it's like you're just sitting in on this conversation. And they're talking to each other. Like, you'd never see this in a symphony.
Yeah.
You never have the conductor like talk to the guy in the front row. He's like, "What do you think of that?" He's like, "That was unbelievable."
Yeah.
But that's what they're doing in the classical.
Just with them in the front.
Yeah.
It's like a conversation.
Yeah, and they'll say, I never really knew what it was because it was all in Hindi.
Yeah.
But I'd ask people, and basically you hear a lot of kebate. And kebate, it translates as, "What was that?" But it's basically like, "What, are you kidding me?"
Yeah.
That was unbelievable.
What was that?
They'd be like, "Kebate, oh my gosh."
Yeah.
So it's really beautiful. And so I started going to all of these incredible private concerts.
Is this also for most people, Ravi Shankar is like...
Yeah, right, exactly.
He's...
And that's this type of music. And so Ravi Shankar's main tabla player was Alaraka. And Alaraka's a wonderful tabla player. Alaraka had a son named Zakir Hussain, who many people know because he now teaches where I went to school. Or no, he doesn't anymore. He teaches at Cal Arts, I think. But yeah, an incredible tabla player, and so that's a long lineage. But that's the style of music I was studying.
Yeah.
And it's just a really beautiful way of playing music,
Yeah.
And so we've done that a little bit actually here at the farm, where we've done private concerts, and just to bring that kind of house concert back into it. And then my parents in Tucson got really into house concerts, and they started having like these incredible house concerts. But it's just a style of music you don't see so much anymore, or a style of presenting music, where you fund it. And you really pay the musicians well. And then you just invite people to a private, like people that are educated in the music. So, not like a bar where people are trying to pick up people. It's like everybody's actually listening.
Yeah.
And that listening is getting the musicians off.
Yeah.
Like then everybody, it's not this thing of you're performing. It's as an audience member, you're increasing the vibration of the whole room to make the music like that much more powerful.
Yeah.
So it's really this collaborative feel,
Yeah.
And it's really an extraordinary experience.
That's amazing. And so like when that would happen in some of these settings, traditionally they also have they do have big concerts.
They have festivals.
Festivals.
Yeah.
But what was the music traditionally used for, right? Because you hear even in Indian music, you hear the Indian classical music, but then there's also Kirtan, and so these styles of music that were really used to for spiritual practice. Yeah. Right? So is that similar with Indian classical?
Yeah, it is. And each rag is known to invoke a certain thing, Yeah. So some rags there's a famous story. So the music was traditionally patronized by the Maharajas of India.
Okay.
So what is a Maharaja? You can think of a Maharaja as like a governor of a certain region, but they're passed on through the family. So it's like the royal family, like the royal family of England. It's it's like passed on from generation to generation, and the Maharajas live in these incredible palaces. Yeah. And those palaces are all still there today. There's a couple Maharajas left, but they don't have much power. But back in the day they did, and they all had court musicians. So one of my teachers, Ali Akbar Khan, he originally started as a court musician.
Wow.
He's one of the last, court musicians. He's passed now, but
Yeah.
I mean, he literally, as a young man, just played, and he would play for the king to help him fall asleep. So you'd have like your own musician come and like play me an evening rag while I go to bed.
Wow.
This is before Pandora and stuff.
Yeah, and iPods.
And then they would hold similar concerts, private concerts for the elite.
Yeah.
But there was one guy who was, and there was very much a belief, and there still is, that the swara, it's called swara, and swara is a certain configuration of notes, and that they can have power in the manifest world.
Yeah.
So if you arrange a certain amount of notes in a certain way, and then there's a way that you can imbue a note with life. So you can play an F flat, and it's just a dead note. It just plays, right? But you can play an F flat in a way that invokes a kind of living quality to it. So the lifetime of study of a classical Indian music is learning how to bring the life out of the notes. Once you do that, and then you combine that with swara, with the combination of notes in a correct way that's been passed down for 1,000 years, you can manifest, according to tradition, you can alter the physical world. Mm-hmm. So here's an example. There's a famous vocalist in Varanasi. This was during the time of the Maharaj. And the Maharaj wanted the vocalist to sing a certain melody that supposedly would light fire. And the musician said, I really can't, and it's not, I'm forbidden from doing this and all this stuff. And finally the Maharaja forced him to, and he said, I'll only do it if I'm up to my neck in the Ganges water. So the river Ganges. So he went into the river Ganges and he started singing, and when he hit the swara and he imbued it with life, his head exploded into flames. So there's a lot of like legends like this,
Yeah.
But some of them are less legendary than others. Supposedly, so Ali Akbar Khan is missing a finger. Mm-hmm. And the story I was told was that he was taught a raga, but taught not to play it until he had mastered other things. And he went out behind his house and played it one day, and his finger fell off.
I love it.
So there is this quality that it's not just about the music, that you're actually invoking this kind of energy into this world, and and the energy can be dangerous, or it can be, it can be healing, or And so a lot of the study it's so deep. So my teacher, I had been, I'd lived in India I'd been there for, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 months. I flew into Varanasi.
Yeah.
I'd never been outside of Varanasi. I'd never seen any other part of India.
Yeah.
And not only that, I met my teacher every morning for lessons, and then it took me a minimum of 5 hours to learn what I needed to learn to be able to present it the next day.
Wow. So practicing that.
All
later.
I did. I mean, and at one point, I'm like 5 months into this, and never had a day off. Yeah. And I was like, what am I doing? This is ridiculous. Like, I need to go experience India. Like, all I'm doing is sitting in my like little bedroom, just playing these tals, these rhythm cycles. Yeah. So the next morning I really had this, like, I'm done, and I'm like, I'm going to go see India. Yeah. So I went to my teacher and I said, listen, I've got to get out of here. I've got to go see India. I've come all this way, And he says, I can't do an Indian accent, so I won't do it. But he's like, listen, you can go see India. He's like, but all of India is what would it be, a microcosm? Or he said India is a microcosm of the universe. And I'm like, okay, now he's waxing poetic, like, shut up, old man. Like, I'm just letting you know I'm not coming back for lessons, He says, India is a microcosm of the universe. And he says, and Varanasi is a microcosm of India. He said, anything in India you can see in Varanasi. And then he says, and Tal, which is rhythm cycles, is the microcosm of Varanasi. He said, so you can go on your vacation, he said, but everything you ever need to see in the whole universe is found in studying rhythm cycles. Oh, wow. He said, and if you just settle down, you'll see the whole universe. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, that's beautiful. I'm leaving tomorrow.
Go get out
So
of
I
here.
took off, and
Yeah.
he promised me I'd bring my tablas. And to this day, I still regret that I did, because they're a nightmare to travel with.
Yeah.
They're super heavy, you know?
Yeah.
And I went all over India. I went, I wanted to see the Taj Mahal,
Yeah.
and I really wanted to go on camel. So I went camel
Yeah.
trekking in Rajasthan, and like I had to store my tablas someplace. But he made me promise I would continue practicing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's a depth and a beauty. And later I realized, not that Tal is a microcosm of the universe, but I realized that rhythm cycles have a lot more to do than you first meet CI. There's a real profound depth to understanding rhythm cycles.
Did you go back to study with him?
Yeah, I did. I went back, and I went on
back.
vacation. He's housed vacation. I was like, it was awesome.
Yeah.
He's like, okay, now let's get back to work, And it was super good that I did that. It was necessary.
And what was it that you feel like has been what was the depth that you feel like you got from?
So it maybe wasn't until I went on 3-year retreat that I started to realize. So there's a tradition in Buddhism called Kala Chakra, and Kala means time, and chakra means cycle, and it's another name for Tala. Tala is rhythm cycles, and
Yeah.
Kala Chakra is time cycles.
Yeah.
Kala Chakra is how time moves in the body and how time is flexible. So if, for example, if anybody listening right now, if you clog one or the other nostril, you'll realize that one nostril is a little clearer than the other. And that's what we say in the Indian tradition, is that's prana moving more clearly in one of the two side channels in the body. If you test that every couple hours, you'll notice that more clogged area switches back and forth from right to left. They say in the Indian tradition that movement back and forth and right and left has to do with, and this gets into a much bigger topic, but it has to do with our perception of subject and object. So prana running in the left-hand channel has to do with our perception of subject, and prana running through the right-hand channel has to do with object. Time needs subject and object. You can't have, if there's no subject and object, there's no thing experiencing anything. So you can't have time. So I know this gets super abstract, but I can just give you the quick lowdown. So time can be manipulated through the movement of prana in the body. So ultimately, classical Indian music ultimately comes down to subtle manipulations of prana running through the body and altering time and then altering perceptions of reality. So it's funny because what I found in classical Indian music is the exact same thing I found years later when I started getting deep into yoga philosophy.
Yeah.
And they're coming out of similar traditions.
Yeah.
But I was like, oh wow, this is a lot of the same stuff. In order to become a tabla master, you do something called a chiya, which is Chilla. And a chiya is a 40-day water fast where you only drink water. And traditionally, you pin your hair to the back wall and you don't move.
Dude.
And you just play your
Wow.
instrument every waking hour.
Wow.
And it sounds, to a Westerner, it sounds, that's totally not true. That would never happen. You can't do that.
Yeah.
But it really does happen, and people really do it. All you
Yeah.
do is you pee, you drink water, and you play your instrument.
Yeah.
And you go crazy a
Yeah.
little bit, You go, and for example, Zakir Hussain, I believe, did 3 chiyas before he reached his late teen years.
Oh my gosh.
And traditionally, you do your chiyas when you're young, because by the time you get older, you've seen too much negativity in the world that you can actually flip yourself into a full-on psychotic break. So it's helpful. To have a certain purity of heart,
Yeah.
and only hardcore people do chiyas.
Wow.
I never did a chiya. I will never do a chiya. It's too
Yeah.
late now.
Yeah.
But
You've seen too much dark side.
But supposedly there's a thing in classical Indian music called the secret. And this is not the secret of Western New Ageism.
Yeah.
But this is that there's a secret that's revealed in chiyas. And you see somebody who's done a chiya, their level of proficiency on their instrument is unfathomable. You're like, how is this person playing? Like with tabla, how is this person suddenly playing this fast with this much clarity? And I saw one guy who supposedly got the secret, and I did see him play before and after, and it was very, very hard to conceive of how he made that switch so quickly.
Interesting.
Last thing, supposedly, every master will only give the secret to one student.
Oh.
And so everyone's always vying to get the secret from the teacher.
Dude.
It sounds so absurd when I talk about it, but it's when you're in that scene, you know?
Yeah.
Everyone's like, did he get the secret? You know?
Yeah.
Did he get the
you know,
the lineage?
The lineage.
He becomes
holder.
the lineage holder.
Yeah.
And then, you know, Zakir got it from Alaraka, and, you know, so every, Ali Akbar Khan and Ravi Shankar and Lakshmi Shankar, they all had the same teacher, Ustad Ali Khan. And, you know, it's like, who's he going to give the secret to?
Yeah.
You know? But it's really...
Who got it?
It's a fun world, but it's a world of profound depth that's... you see that also in jazz. This jazz starts to get into some of this depth of moving into the spiritual realm, too.
Yeah.
But as you mentioned, they do music festivals, and some of those music festivals are really magical, and they go all night long.
Yeah.
And it's just really an extraordinary experience to...
Does it also feel like playing it? So you're saying, you know, just going back to the movement in the body, right? And what happens with time. Does it feel like just hearing it, is that do something, or other than just playing it?
I found my ability to appreciate classical Indian music skyrocketed when I started to understand the rules of the game. Just in the exact same way as watching football.
Yeah.
It would be boring as hell, you know? And you see Westerners go to a traditional raga in my last 3 or 4 hours. They're bored out of their mind within 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And it'd be like going to a football game and you don't even know the rules and everyone's just yelling and running back and forth. It's like, what's going on?
Yeah.
So the more I got into the philosophy and the more I studied the more on a depth level, and particularly the more when I started to finally be able to count through the tals. And that's really your access point.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter who you are. You always, it's not drummers. Everybody learns to count through the tals.
Yeah.
Because that's your way of understanding the building and the resolution of tensions. And then the more you study swara, the more you study ragas, and the more you study, you're like, oh, you start to understand how this is unfolding. And then you can really tell when it's unfolding in a skillful way or not in a skillful way. And then it becomes literally edge of your seat excitement.
Wow.
So I went to a concert one time in Marin in the Bay Area, and I had to catch the last bus home to San Francisco. And I had to leave the concert right before it was resolved. And I was extremely agitated in my body for about 5 days.
You didn't get the resolution.
And I felt like, it was almost like sexual frustration. I was so agitated, and I was like, I will never do that again. And I realized, something's happening, you know?
Yeah.
And you're putting yourself into this like system. And if you don't follow it out, it's like, I was so irritable. And it's just like, it being like super irritable for like 4 days, you know? I was like, never again.
See it through to the end.
Oh my gosh. But it's a beautiful, beautiful tradition. And and again, if you have a tradition that's that old, you know, it's like 1,000-year-old tradition. They've worked out the elements.
Yeah.
And again, so much of it is being lost now because none of the young people are studying. They don't put in the hours that are necessary.
Spending the time.
And we would call it really abusive, actually, in some ways. I mean, Ali Akbar Khan was pretty much from the age of 3 onwards not allowed to ever play or play like as a kid.
Yeah.
Do anything but play his musical instrument.
Yeah.
And his entire life. And so, you know, you talk about, like, nowadays they talk about, like, it takes 10,000 hours to be a master, you know?
Yeah.
If you do the numbers, we're talking, like, 50,000 hours. And it's like, it's incredible the amount of dedication that's put into it. And that's been lost a little bit.
Yeah.
But,
I wonder if we'll ever return to that kind of way of being as we're kind of far on this other side now.
Yeah.
Will that ever come back, you know?
Yeah, and maybe we're just moving into a new kind of, like... Yeah, I doubt we'll get back to that, but maybe I don't know if that's good or bad, but something is definitely lost, you know?
Yeah.
And having experienced it, I realized it's so profound.
Yeah.
It's so extraordinary.
Yeah. That's awesome, man.